Good evening and welcome to our latest in conversation. And this evening we're delighted to be joined by Cathy Rentzenbrink. Is that correct? Is that how you say it?
Well done, yes.
That's okay, I've been practicing all day. These events are free, but if you'd like to donate to Libraries Unlimited, which is a charity that runs 54 libraries in Devon and Torbay, there's a link in the chat. And we're also posting to over 30 libraries from Ottery St Mary to Oakhampton today. So hello to everybody else who's watching at those libraries. It's very soggy in Devon this evening, so it's a perfect evening to sort of snuggle up on the sofa and have a listen to us having a chat. If you'd like to ask a question, please pop in the chat and I will ask Cathy on your behalf. So Cathy is an acclaimed memoirist, that's a bit of a mouthful, whose books include The Last Act of Love, Dear Reader, and in 2021 she published her first novel, which I have a proof of here, which is called Everyone is Still Alive. And she has a book about how to write your own memoir coming out in January, which is called Write It All Down. Cathy regularly chairs literary events, interviews authors, reviews books, runs creative writing courses, and speaks on life, death, love, and literature. And despite being shortlisted for various prizes, this is really sad, the only thing that Cathy has ever won is the Snaith and District Ladies Darts Championship when she was 17. And she is now sadly out of practice. I can't believe that. I can't believe that you haven't won anything. Your books are amazing. I'm a bit.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
I'm a bit of a fangirl. I have to admit that straight from the start. So good evening and welcome. And you recently released your first novel, which is called Everyone is Still Alive. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I will. Actually, I've got the finished copy here. So it is beautiful, isn't it? One of the really lovely things about writing books is you toil away for ages on your own, kind of, with a pen and paper or on your computer. It's just sort of, bits of paper, and then building towards that moment when your publishers start talking to you about jacket designs and things like end papers and these lovely yellow end papers. So I really like all that bit, and so I think they've done an absolutely beautiful job about it. So yes, Everyone is Still Alive. It's a novel. It's about a woman called Juliet whose mother dies and leaves her a very nice house in West London in a place called Magnolia Road, and Juliet decides to move there with her husband Liam, who's a writer, and their son Charlie, who's just about to have his 5th birthday. And then the action takes place over the course of the next year. Because Juliet's mother has just died, people keep saying to her, it takes a year, it'll take you a year to get over it. So I thought it would be interesting to look at a year in their lives and also how they get involved with the other people in the street. Because Liam is not only a writer, he's a writer who's stuck on his difficult second novel. So he decides, Juliet sort of reads in the riot act and says, make sure you become friends with all those mums at the school gate, because she's off to work and he's looking after the boy. And he decides that if he's got to be friends with them for his son's sake, he might as well put them in his next novel. And that's the setup, and it all unfolds from there.
It's kind of a sort of fly on the wall, isn't it, of these people's lives in Magnolia Road. And sort of what gave you that idea? When I first started reading it, I was thinking it reminded me of motherhood, but then it's not the same as motherhood at all, because it's a lot more sort of gentle and not as crazy but I think it's sort of that sort of street, isn't it, with the couples and everybody getting to know each other, and I really liked the idea of Liam sort of scribbling everything down and working out what he was going to put in his book. What gave you the idea for it to write the novel?
Well, I'm interested in how peculiar life with small children is. Like it really is. It's a different planet, or certainly I experienced it as a different planet. And I wanted to write something about it, but I didn't want to write more non-fiction, probably largely because I didn't feel comfortable writing about my real child and my real husband. So I put them in a novel instead. But I've also, and there was lots. I think I didn't watch Motherland before.
Motherland, that's it.
And I think it's really different tonally, but I have watched a bit now because people keep saying to me it's very like it, and it's the same territory, and I definitely see the same urge, which is that you experience all this weird stuff and you just want to do something with it, you know, like just the craziness of the whole class parties and the way you get sort of thrust into companionship with other people randomly. But actually, it's not just about being a mother. I think it's also about being a father. So I'm also really interested in what it means to be a father now. It's also about any kind of long-term relationship and how that's altered once you've got a child. And of course, it's also about grief, because Juliet's mother has recently died. And it's about expectation, and it's about the anxieties of modern life. Because one of the things I just find so astonishing about modern life is, even when you're relatively fortunate, you know, with no actual present problems, nothing real, it just seems very stressful the whole time. And education is stressful, and the whole class parties, and whether to throw them and how to throw them, and what, you know, it's all very stressful. So I wanted to kind of like have a poke around in all of that, but probably my original intent was a little bit more satirical. But I always think when you get to know people, always for me, when I get to know people, I just like them more. As soon as I understand what's on the bonnet, what's under the bonnet, I start forgiving them for their peculiar behaviour. And I felt a bit the same in the novel as well. I sort of softened towards my own characters
as you went through them. Because I mean, the characters are very relatable, and I have 3 children, and I remember the stress of World Book Day costumes, well, any costumes, and they always tell you, I mean, World Book Day, you do get a bit of notice, but I remember having to make like 2 Tudor costumes the night before, and the tunic, I remember like chopping up bits and like finding old, you know, dressing gown cords, and so I've really, but one of the characters makes her son a sort of a tunic because he wants to go as Darth Vader, and she won't let him, will she? Because and
well, she's following the rules, because they've said it's World Book Day, and they've said no superheroes or cartoon characters. It's got to be someone from a book. So he just wants to go as Darth Vader in his Darth Vader costume. She follows the rules, and it all goes horribly wrong. And then she gets there, and loads of the kids are in superhero costumes, and no one else has followed the rules, but she has, and now he's effectively wearing this dress. I mean, I will admit, shush, I'll just tell all of you that out of the whole novel, that scene is the one that is the most purely autobiographical. The woman with the Robin Hood, the crap Robin Hood costume, was me. And I sobbed. You know, I left him at school and I cried on the train. I felt so useless. And of course, at this distance, it kind of seems a bit silly to me now. Why was I crying at not doing a good costume? But I mean, I was. I felt like a terrible failure over it. So
well, I do, and I remember like going up to school, and like the mums that had forgotten, you know, the kids that are in school uniform, and you're just like, oh no.
Oh, that's shameful. Yeah, when you've forgotten that it's, you know, again, they're all supposed to be wearing yellow for one charity, or they're blue for, or they're supposed to be wearing sports kit, or dressed up as a number. That was another one I remember that really did me in. And they also, you'd always forget, and then at the last minute it'd be like, how are we dressing you up as a number? And you've got this little child there, sort of standing there with these big trusting eyes, saying like, I don't know, but not liking any of your ideas.
And I remember one of my middle one wanted to go as Gandalf one year, and you're like, why can't you just go as Where's Wally like your brother did? And so I remember like having to like get a sheet, and like I found some sheep's wool and made this big beard, and then getting my husband to make a star for him, and it's just, and the pressure, because they want to win as well. That's the thing. I don't know whether your school did a competition, but ours was like they wanted to win, so they didn't want a rubbish costume. But so that
I didn't put this in the book, but I remember there was an Easter bonnet parade, and the kids really wanted to win. And of course, my child was in a straw hat that he'd made himself, as in he got a straw hat and like had drawn something on it in felt tip. And loads of the other kids were in really elaborate and just like that we were all standing around pretending that these 6-year-olds had made these costumes themselves. Just sort of really mad.
No, and I think that's probably with Motherland, that's the thing, isn't it? Is that it is very much about that sort of, it is like competition. And you were saying about how, you know, the friendships, you know, you're pushed into friendships with people that you would never be friends with normally, because your child's in the same class, or you know, and that, you know, they have completely different lives, and particularly living in a street where everybody like they are, it felt, you know, it's quite claustrophobic at times, isn't it? Because it's, you know, they're all sort of popping in and out, and they're really interesting. I liked I sort of liked I can't remember her name, but Baz was the husband.
Yeah, Lucy,
that's it. Yeah, so she's very sort of, you know, she sort of accepts, I don't want to spoil it, but he decides that you know, he's going to have a sort of a bit of a dalliance, doesn't he? And she's quite like matter of fact about it all, isn't she? You know.
Yeah, I really enjoyed writing her, and she's mainly pissed off because, as she says to someone else, like he's just broke. I thought we'd both accepted that we were just going to have this shit life together. You know, we've got these twins. We were just going to like bring them up, and it's not very much fun. No shit, Sherlock. You know, but now he's broken the rules and he's gone off with someone else, and he wants to like have fun.
Yeah, I did, because when he decides he's going to have off, when she's, you know, like the, you know, typical, she's younger and, you know, she's not got kids and all those sorts of things. So yeah, I did really feel for her. I've got a question that's just come in from Serena, and it was a question that I was going to ask, so I can slot it in nicely, which is, how different was writing the novel from writing your memoirs, sort of that transition from non-fiction to fiction? Was it difficult?
Yeah, and it's really different, mainly because with, not that memoir feels this way actually when you're writing it, but at least with memoir you have some grounding in the facts and what happened. And the reason why it took me so long to write my first novel was just the fact that it could be anything. You know, it could be set on Mars, it could have 16 people in it, this could happen, that could happen. And I struggled for ages with how to narrow myself down to a theme, a small, and I, you know, and in my next novel, I mean, I have learned in my next novel there are far fewer characters again. I now feel I was a bit over ambitious. I think if someone was saying to me, I'm writing a novel, I'm going to do it the same as you, I'm going to have 8 main characters and they're all going to have kids, I'd be like, no, just pick one and stick with them. So yeah, so my next novel is going to have fewer characters already. So it's really different from that point of view. I'm finding it easier having it out in the world though. So I think when you write about yourself, there's no protection. So even though, you know, and again, like with the novel, I mean, if I've chosen to tell you that World Book Day scene is quite close to my own experience, but I kind of, you've just got such a plausible deniability on all of it. I don't feel responsible for it, because even that World Book Day scene, I did take it from my life, but as it happens in the novel, it's not mine anymore. Things are definitely transformed. Even if you source your own life into a book, once you've fictionalized it, I feel it's kind of like gone on the wind somehow. So that definitely feels a lot easier for me, having fiction out in the world than having non-fiction, than having there's something really exposing about having like real stuff about yourself out in the world. So those I'd say were the key differences. And then lots is the same. Like it's the same how you sort of create atmosphere and how you bring it to life on the page. I think that's all the same skills.
Because I mean, your first 2 books deal with, you know, with your grief of your loss of your brother, and that must have been, you know, I guess, did it help for you to deal with your sort of grief? Did it sort of bring it all back up again? And many reviews have said that the books have helped other people with their own grief. So it's sort of like, does that feel like quite a big responsibility, sort of like you were saying about like the novel is not real, so but whereas if you're writing about something that is real and happened and true, and people are going to take it as the manual for heartache, isn't it? So is that harder?
I mean, I think the fact that so it was really hard to write my first book, but the fact that people find it helpful feels like a complete beautiful miracle to me. I didn't expect, it's not why I wrote it, and I didn't expect it, but people do. And I still hear from people all the time that have found that book helpful. And that does make me feel, that just makes me feel really good. So I'll never in any way regret, I don't think I would regret it anyway, but I will never regret it just because of the connection that it has meant, that has happened between me and people reading it. And I think I don't ever feel uneasy about the, because lots of people write to me and message me. I love all of that. That bit never makes me feel uneasy. I think it's just, as well as all of that, you're always, just slightly painfully aware that, I mean, not everybody does like it. And now that it's there, you don't control who reads it. So every so often, someone who I just don't feel easy with, could even be someone who's an existing connection, and they'll say things like, you know, oh, I read your book, and then leave this silence. And honestly, that feels really grim. That feels like someone's like in your knicker drawer or whatever. And of course, I've done it. I've asked for it. That's what you do when you put it out into the world. But it's that, I think, that makes me feel uneasy, not the other response. And again, it's the funny old thing, because of course mostly I get amazing responses to my book, but often the ones that lodge uncomfortably in the head are the sort of the slightly, I mean, and honestly, it's probably like 0.5%, 1/4%. It's like a tiny amount, but that's the bit that gives me the itches.
That's the thing, is like, you know, I know I did a sort of bibliotherapy course a while ago, and with Ella, who came to your thing, and she has lots of books about death, and you know when she's doing it, and you know, you don't have to read. That's the thing, is with books, isn't it? You don't have to read what you don't want to read. You know, it's nobody sitting you there and making you read it. So I think, you know, you do have a choice, and I sort of get a bit grumpy when people read things and then are really horrible about it, because I think, well, you don't have to sit there and read it. If you get to the point where you're just like, I don't want to read this anymore, this is not for me, and just put it down and move along.
Just stop.
So people are strange when it comes to sort of to writing books and or reading other people's books and reviewing them. And I absolutely loved, I mean, dear reader, and I know Serena, who's watching, her and I read this together, which is here, and it's beautiful and shiny, and I absolutely loved it. And it was I read it earlier this year, and it's been one of my favorite books this year, because it really resonated with me, because you read quite a lot of similar books to me. You know, you did Narnia and Agatha Christie and Jilly Cooper, and in it you talk about the books and that you read them at different times of your life. And I mean, I remember those, but when you were writing that, did it sort of come back to you, or had you actually written down, or was it sort of you went back and then they sort of popped up and you thought, oh, I was reading that then? Or
I mean, I found it I wanted to write a book about books, and my original idea was much more sort of thematic, and I actually just found it I think my original idea was to read a book a week for a year and write about them that way. And again, it was just really hard to manage the books, not the reading of the books, but manage the memoir strand of it. So I sort of gave that up, and instead did a chronological, you know, I'll start at the beginning and then just went through my reading life, just because I was struggling too much to manage the material. You know, like if I trying the other way, it's like, well, 1 minute I'm in New York with one husband, and then I'm like somewhere else with another husband, and we don't quite know how that's happened, and then I'm somewhere else saying like, I'm never going to get married. So it's just all that was sort of confusing. But I really did. I mean, I feel I have a really nice, easy relationship with that book out in the world, because again, I've just really found my tribe. It's just, you know, basically I've just found everyone that loves that book is kind of like me, which is just delightful. So I had this lovely message from someone today, and she said, I've been reading your book, she said, and up until now, I've only had one friend who understands what I feel about reading, she said, and now I've got you too. And I just thought, oh, that's blissful, isn't it? I love that. So it definitely did feel like that when I was reading it. And Serena's just said, I'd like to thank Cathy for Dear Reader, and lots of hearts. So and it is like your tribe. It is like sort of finding your football team, or you know, your group, or because, you know, being a reader and devouring books like I did when I was a child, and other people did when they were a child, is not cool and hip, and you know, and you make it cool and hip in Reader. I think, you know, the people who didn't do that are really, you know, they've missed out, I think. You say, or people say that everybody has a book in them, and obviously as a someone who writes memoirs, do you believe that? Do you think everyone does, or do you think it is yeah, I mean, I probably do. Again, not quite everyone, as in if really someone really doesn't, I wouldn't force them. I mean, I do feel that about reading. I don't obviously I think reading is great and I think writing is great, but if someone just wants to be left alone to enjoy watching and playing football, then I sort of wouldn't keep nagging at them. Do you know what I mean? People are allowed other hobbies allowed here too. But I definitely feel that anybody who has the urge for it, who has the inclination, I always want to really help those people get a book out of themselves. And again, I really like working with them on all the things that are blocking them from doing that. And that's what I spend quite a lot of my time doing now, teaching. And that's what my next book is going to be about. And I find that, again, just sort of a really joyous privilege. Partly, I think, because as a writer, the self-doubt in me is really strong, so I feel like all of my writing is 95% self-doubt management and 5% like, shall I make that long sentence into two shorter sentences? Someone once said to me, actually, a literary agent once said, I've been thinking about writing and I decided it's all down to grammar and empathy. And I was just like, no, it's really not for me. Grammar's such a very, very small part of it. Of course, empathy, probably, I do have plenty of that. But I think because the self-doubt is so strong in me, I'm just really good at, I just really understand it and recognize it in other people and help them both how to grapple with it themselves, and also like what to do practically, how to jump over that so that they can get started on paper.
You teach, like you said, you teach creative writing courses, and recently we spoke to Zancy Barker, who was had written her own memoir and worked with you as you were a prize.
I was a prize. That was pretty cool.
Exciting. And in January you have this book, which I was very lucky to get a copy of, which is called Write It All Down. And it says on the back, I'm reading, that it is a guide to putting your life on paper. And I'm really looking forward to reading it. What was it that sort of you wanted to share that?
I mean, I think as soon as I started teaching, people I was teaching would say to me, you do have to do a book about this, And at first I'd be sort of like, oh no, I haven't done it long enough. Again, all the things that we say when we don't think we should. And then gradually I thought, well, actually I would like to collect all my thoughts together on this subject into one place. So it's not at all that I think I've got all the answers, because I remain not only willing to accept but hopeful. I want my own understanding to be a work in progress, and I don't think anyone has all the answers. But what I'm trying to do is sort of provide a helpful and encouraging presence beside someone who, again, sort of has the urge or inclination to start writing. And I do, because I was reading it the other day, doing the proofreader queries, and that just happened that I was doing the proofreader queries after having sort of a miserable couple of days, feeling a bit stuck with the novel I'm writing at the moment. And I mean, it really worked. Really cheered me up about my own work in progress. I was thinking, this is great. Because again, it's very much me. People who've been reading it who know me are saying, like, this is the most you thing you've ever written. This is just absolutely, this is like the unadulterated you. I can hear you. So it's very me, but it's me like on a good day. It's the me who knows my shit. It's not the me that's sort of like kind of, because I also do this, it's not the me who's sort of like, I don't know, loafing around in my pajamas, not wanting to get out of bed and feeling sad about the book that I'm writing. And that's really why I love teaching so much, because when I'm with people, there's something about it being about them and not about me, funnily enough, that just, I feel in flow, as they say. I just feel really good, really connected, and I feel useful. I mean, I love to feel useful. So all those things are really good for me. So it's really me, but like the me, the non-depressed me, I guess, the sort of the me that feels really confident of what I've got to offer, not a sort of a scared, tired version of me.
It must be quite empowering to, when to pick it up, because I mean, even the proof is beautiful. So, and like you say, to see, actually, this is really good. This I did this. But I mean, you've had your first book came out in 2016, and your 5 is number 5. and we're in 2021, so you know, that's a book a year. So I mean, that's amazing, and you know, it's so anybody who's sort of like listening tonight who would like to sort of start a journey, what would you tell them from your sort of 5 year or 6 year ago self, you know, when you were starting out?
I mean, just do it. I mean, the other thing that's worth saying, it might sound completely crazy, but is that, you know, I don't ever find it easy. It's astonishing to me I've written so many books, because they're all really hard. And the write it all down is the pleasant, you know, easiest, most nourishing experience I've had. And I think that was because I had an ideal reader in mind, again, who was exactly this person who wants to write. So I was enjoying telling them. It felt like it was a relationship on the paper. So I felt animated by the presence of that dream reader. But it's like when people say, like, do you think writer's block exists? It's like, you know, I have to get over writer's block every day. Every time I write, I have to get over writer's block. And so that's my continual, I'm in the trenches with this stuff all the time. So yeah, but it's just doing it and starting small, making small little commitments, and just, you know, any sort of morning pages practice is really useful. And again, if you're not a morning person, you can do it before you go to bed. But for most people, and again, start really small. If you've got no time, just write 3 sentences every morning, or just think, like, actually Monday to Friday, I'm going to write 3 sentences every day, or if the weekday doesn't work for you, think Saturday and Sunday, I'm just going to write 3 sentences. A lot of what stops people is they think they need to have too big a plan, or they need to know what they're doing. And again, I still do that as well, because I've got other ideas for things. Like, I've got a really good idea for a children's book. Have I written a word of this? No, because I think I can't possibly start until I've got like more of a plan. So I'm very familiar with it. I'm not doing it because I tell myself things like, I can't possibly write a children's book. I don't even know how long a children's book is supposed to be. And I don't even know, I'm never even quite sure. When people say middle grade, I don't even know what that means. I don't know enough about, you know, so I do it myself about other things. And I think that's what people think. And then they think, like, oh, well, I can't possibly write a book unless I, you know, go on a long course, or I mean, I do think courses are really good, but you don't have to necessarily sign up for an MA.
No.
You do a short course somewhere and keep an eye out for good things to do. So that's sort of my nutshell advice. But the main thing is just get starting, get moving, get a notebook and start doodling about in it.
Writing anything. Do you have a writing schedule? Do you like get up and do, you know, are you a morning or an evening or a?
I'm very much a morning person, which I mean, I didn't used to be a morning person. Then I had to stop drinking alcohol. I wasn't a morning person before, because I was always a hungover person. And as it turns out, as a sober person, I'm a morning person. Yeah, I definitely like to work before I've sort of let the world in. And I've got a child, so I have to, I think, make a decision to be a decent human being first before being a writer. So if I was making my decision purely as a writer, I would wake up and I would write first thing without talking to anyone. But I don't think that's fair on my family. So what I do is I take my son to school and then I go writing. But I don't do, I wouldn't, like, for example, listen to the radio in the car on the way to the writing, because it'll just put me off. If I listen to the Today programme, I'm just screwed then, because it's very difficult to take my own preoccupation seriously when I've just listened to the news. So that I think is really useful to know. When I talk to most people at the beginning, I think they're always a little bit surprised how much of it isn't me saying to them, you know, like, let me impart to you the great secrets of literature. It's telling them to get off their phones, stop listening to the news in the mornings, stop looking at Facebook first thing. You've got to create a bit of space, and that's really important. So I do that, and then so when I'm at home, I would normally do that every morning, and then and again, not look at any email or outside world until after midday. That's my sort of rule for myself. And it's more difficult then when it's really nice doing live events. I've been doing quite a lot of traveling in the last couple of months, which I love, but it's just driven a truck through my writing routine, because it's, I keep thinking to myself, why is it, if I can, I'm on a train now for 2 hours, why can't I just write on the train? And I sort of feel I should be able to, but it's hard, and I'm distracted, and I'm on my way from one thing to another thing, and so
yeah, I'm a bit like that.
Yeah, so that's tricky.
I always think I'm going to read on the train. I've got like 4 hours, and then I just end up being on Twitter or Facebook or looking out the window, and then thinking, oh well, it's no point getting it out now because I'm nearly there, and I'll have to put my bag up. So I think that sort of procrastination is everybody's worst enemy. So Casey has said, oh my gosh, 8 main characters. I take notes when I'm reading and do a review, but 8 main characters I'd lose track of if I just read it, she said. So actually what that leads into another question that I was going to ask you, which you sort of covered earlier on, which was, what lessons did you learn from your earlier books that you've taken into the ones you're writing now? Which you sort of said about the characters, about
I just think it's not impossible with and as it was, originally my intention was that we have 8 point of view characters, so we'd have chapters from 8 different people, and I actually changed that, so we actually only have 6 point of view characters, and the 2 others you don't ever hear from them, but I might write about them in the future. Because it's just really difficult, and everybody needs a distinctive voice, and that's really hard. So yes, in the next novel I've only got 1 point of view character. Oh, really? And there are fewer people, so that's something I think I learned. A lot of it is slightly back to the self-doubt stuff, to expect that I'll spend quite a lot of time feeling confused and thinking it's useless and that's not objective. I just need to, I don't know, do whatever, go for a walk, have a nap, just not get involved with my own, not get involved. And the other thing I've learned, again, the main reason my first novel took me so long to write was I just kept giving up on drafts. So I kept throwing away whole books, basically. And I'm not doing that now. So what I've decided now is when I commit to an idea and a theme, I'm finishing it, and it doesn't have to be any good, but it does have to be finished. And it's really interesting. So I'm sort of done about 42,000 words of the next novel, and I'm doing exactly what I used to do with the first novel. Like, oh, why am I writing another contemporary novel? I hate contemporary life. Why did I do it? I hate these people with their phones. Why am I writing a historical novel? Why shouldn't I could write a historical novel? Why don't I write a novel about Cathy de Medici? Oh, that's a bit hard. I could write a novel about the Second World War, blah, blah. All that. I'm doing that, but I'm not letting myself. Whereas the first novel, I just kept actually giving up and throwing it away, starting something else, and then that thing would become difficult too. Whereas this time I can write all those other novels in the future, but I have to finish this novel, and I know I will finish that novel, and that is making it easier. And I would really recommend that to everyone out there, because the point is, it doesn't really matter whether or not your first novel is any good. It just matters that it's really good for us to finish things. And whether or not you get a rubbishy first draft and you then edit into something better, or you just you finish a novel and you think that's great, I've written a whole novel, now I'm going to write a better one. But I don't think I'd have understood that before. I probably wouldn't have been able to take that advice. I'd probably thought, well, that's a bit pointless, not going to waste my time doing that when I've got a better idea. But it's not good for us to end up with so I've always been like queen of the first chapter, the amount of titles and first lines and first chapters I had, but never getting further. And then over time you just really start to believe that you can't get further, so it's very confidence building to finish something.
Have you ever written short stories? Have you ever done those?
I always think I should, because I've always got more ideas than I've got room for, if you know what I mean. And I was thinking about it earlier on today. Why don't I just try writing some short stories? But I suppose I'm not that keen on them, to be honest, as a form. So I would always about 10 times rather read a novel than read a book of short stories. So, and that's probably why I don't. It's difficult to commit. It's difficult to do something that I don't really, and I don't know why. Why don't I like them? If I really like a story that's 70,000 words long, why don't I like a story that's 4,000 words long? But I'm just not.
No, I'm
not that bothered.
I never read them very much, and then we do a shared reading group at the library, and we sort of share. We have like a group, and we read together, and we sort of. So I've had to find more, but I find them problematic to read because I sometimes find them that I want to know more, or there's too much information crammed in to one. And we did one of the Agatha Christie's the other day. And that was the Blood on the Pavement, which is in her, which
swimming costumes and
the over the
switcheroo,
So I think it was the basis of Evil Under the Sun. But so she did make it longer eventually. But it felt too like there was too much in it for. And I think you get used. I mean, obviously, some people love them. So, I think it is definitely a sort of a personal preference, isn't it? Some people love short stories, some people read books and books. But I think it's very much, individual, what each person likes. And going back to your memoirs and sort of like when you've written something as personal as your first book, particularly The Act of Love. Is that The Act of Love?
The Last Act of Love,
How difficult is it when you come to like the editing process for that? Because obviously it's very personal, it's yours. It's not like a novel where someone can come in and go, well, that doesn't happen. Is it? Because it did. Is it different, the process of editing for non-fiction than fiction?
I mean, I think that actually, I think the editing is when you understand editing and realize it's not that someone's turning their nose up at you, it's that they're trying to help you make it better and more effective. So again, because I'm teaching a new 3-month group, and I've been saying to them, I'm after how can we make this more effective? We're asking the question, is this working? We're not asking the question, is this good or is this bad? It's, is this as effective as it could be? So once you've clocked that, I think editing actually it's one of the reasons I think why writing about yourself is quite good, because you sort of accidentally, because you have to disconnect a little bit, and because you have to ask yourself, is that sentence the best way around? I think you sort of almost slightly accidentally get that measure of distance that you're going for in meditation, that idea of I'm not my thoughts, I'm watching myself having my thoughts. And I think that can sort of slightly start happening with editing. So I certainly don't ever perceive editing as damaging that way, and I hope when I work with people as well on their non-fiction, they don't. One of the ways I think about it is I sort of say, let's think about content and process, which is a term therapists use. The idea being content is our story, what's happened to us, and process is the way that we seek to accommodate it and make sense of it. So then I think if you're thinking about writing, content is what's happened to us. My brother died a long and horrible death, but process is the way in which I'm trying to put that on the page. And when I work with other people, I say we must always be really and deeply respectful of our content, both our own content and other people's content. But we can be really rigorous and questing in our process, and that sort of really helps. And I hope that people always know that I really respect them and what's happened to them. But that then also, almost like my job is to ask the questions of, I'm not sure about chapter 7, and I think that chapter 9 could be shorter. And as long as the person knows that you respect them and what's happened to them, that doesn't come and shouldn't come as a great shock.
I mean, anybody sort of taking, it's not even criticism, is it? It's constructive, but people, I know I never was very good at taking it, even if it was positive about essays and things. So it's something I guess you have to learn as an author as well, is that to be able to, that people are doing it for the right reason. It's not a personal thing.
I mean, that is the other thing I do say to people, that if you want to write, I mean, certainly, if you want to write and share it with anyone other than yourself, basically, and certainly if you want to be published, you have to get used to feedback, and also you have to get used to rejection, because even if you go on to sort of have what is objectively viewed as a successful career, there's still, it actually feels like most of the time you're sort of being rejected, because still it feels like everybody likes everybody else's books lots more than they like yours, etc. It just kind of feels like new ways to get rejected all the time. Which to sort of reframe that, I always say, you might as well get used to it, really, because if you're not going to be able to if the first agent rejection is going to put you on the floor. Well, I mean, it might put you on the floor. That's the thing. Will put you on the floor, but can you get up?
Yeah.
And you slightly might as well start getting used to that, because there's probably not a way of it not happening.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at the time and we're nearly at the end. So just before we finish, what do you like to read, Cathy? And do you have anything that you've read recently that you'd like to recommend to our viewers this evening?
I like to read. I always say I like to read everything, and then give a long list of things I don't like to read. I don't like reading true crime, and I'm not particularly bothered about books about sport. But I think I read very wisely. And then the book I'll share with you, because it's just here, is I've been reading Early Morning Riser by Catherine Heine, because I'm going to be interviewing her for Durham Festival. And she's just very sort of perceptive and smart. And I read Standard Deviation as well, her novel before this, and they're just both very good. Just those sort of small truths about human relationships, and then every so often there'll be a really funny joke. So I was just rolling around in bed last night laughing over Standard Deviation, and then reading bits aloud to my husband, and he was laughing as well. So but they kind of take you by, she's gentle, subtle. So that's what I would recommend right now. And the nice thing is that if you asked me that in 2 days, I'd recommend in 2 days' time it'd be something else. So
isn't it? If you're a prolific reader, books come and go quite quickly. And I heard today something like, I said, like, was it 200,000 books a year are published or something like ridiculous? And so that's just bonkers, isn't it? Like, we're never going to get to the bottom of our TBR pile ever.
I think you've got to make sure you don't feel sort of chained by it, because that can happen. I think you can get especially as it's terrible. I'm not complaining. It's a great fortunate thing. I get sent lots of books, and then every so often I can just feel a little bit overwhelmed, and then just think, well, I'm just gonna have to almost like draw a line under it and go kind of skiving. Or I really like rereading, so I quite often reread Agatha Christie or Georgette Heyer, or that's my downtime. We were talking about fun the other day, because a friend of mine had said, like, the problem is we haven't done any fun since lockdown. I want to go out dancing and get drunk. And I was telling my son and husband about this, and my husband said I'd quite like to go out dancing and get drunk. And then he said to Matt, he said, but mum wouldn't. Mum would just like to have a bath, put some socks on, and then go and read Virginia Woolf's diaries in bed. I was like, that's my fun these days.
Sound like there's anything wrong with that whatsoever. I mean, why would you want to go out?
Who wants to go to a disco?
And who wants to coming home and putting on your pajamas and reading a book, it's just like, that's life goals, isn't it? Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Cathy. It's been amazing, and I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm really looking forward to reading Write It All Down, and I really loved Everyone Is Still Alive as well. So if you haven't read that one, I definitely recommend. I can recommend this one. It's really great. So next week, I've got to write down my piece of paper. Next Tuesday, we have got a bumper in conversation with Millie Johnson, Nicola May, and Kim Nash, and that is at 7:00 on Facebook Live. So if you could join us then, that would be great. And thank you for joining us this evening. And if you've enjoyed this event, if you like in the comments, and if you're watching on YouTube, if you can like and subscribe, that would be great. Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Cathy. Thank you.